Hello and welcome to Caribbean Content Creators. I am really happy that I started this podcast because I've met amazing content creators who have generously shared their backstory, their creative process, and exactly how you could monetize your content. Ever since I was a little boy, I found myself wanting to chat with creative people, primarily about how brave they were to sing, stand on stage, dance, and tell a joke. I remember I was 8 years old when I saw a ventriloquist for the first time. And after the show, I went and I spoke to the ventriloquist and I said, I would love to speak to your dummy because your dummy has inspired me. Now, the list of people I'm about to share will include the names of dead people because their death has not diminished my desire to speak with them. I think back to when I was 12 years old and saw David Rudder for the first time. He's still alive, thankfully. Calypsonian, an icon in Trinidad and Tobago, a man who is able to produce hit after hit. I remember seeing him at an exposition at the Jean Pierre complex or stadium in Trinidad and Tobago, and I was mesmerized. He was dressed in all white, dreadlocks to his shoulder, and listening to one of his hit tunes, I said, that's someone I would love to speak to. Then there's Chris Garcia. He's a chutney singer. I was maybe 14 years old in secondary school when one February at Carnival, he came and he performed. Handsome East Indian man, long flowing black hair, scrubbing board abs underneath, and energy to entertain. His hit song, which is called Chutney Bacchanal, you still hear it on the airwaves. But for some reason, Chris Garcia has disappeared off of the media scene. I haven't seen any work from him in recent times. But he's someone I'd like to speak to about what his process was like in terms of creating that hit. I'd love to speak with Chris Garcia. There's Sonny Man. He died. I remember seeing him walking home from school one day, and he has the hit song Lotela. I got his autograph. He's collaborated with other entertainers in the soca industry, but I didn't have the chance to speak with him about his story, how he produced his songs, how he educates himself. There's a writer named Tony Dial. I remember as a little boy seeing his picture in the newspaper. It was a cartoon, really. I remember reading his work and being fascinated with his use of puns and thinking to myself, I would like to be a writer one day. And I would like to have 1% of the talent that Tony Dial has. Recently, Tony Dial published a book. And I've reached out to him and he's agreed to chat with me. But somehow it hasn't worked out as yet. Then there's Super Blue, legendary Calypsonian. He has the energy of how can I describe his energy? Recently, I saw him in traffic. We were stuck in traffic because of an accident that took place. There's a car not far ahead of me in another lane, and I could see the passenger, and the passenger is Super Blue. I know this because he exits the car, standstill traffic. He walks onto the median, killing time, and I'm sitting in traffic, looking at Super Blue, and I'm saying to myself, Lyndon, you'd love to speak to that man about his work, his contribution. You've been seeing him as a little boy, climbing scaffoldings and dancing and singing at the same time. And I sit and I stare at Super Blue until the fireman clear the road. And Super Blue jumps in the car as the passenger and carries about his business. And I miss the opportunity as a content creator to chat with someone that I'd love to chat with. There's a young singer named Trinidad Ghost. I'd love to chat with him because his work has a certain daring to it that I admire. Akash Samaroo, Desha Rambajan. They're both news anchors. Some time ago, Akash Samaroo was producing political satire for a media company in Trinidad here. In the vein of The Daily Show. It's interesting to look at his work and see the growth and the evolution of it. But I love to chat with Akash Samaroo about political satire in Trinidad and Tobago. Desha Rambajan is a female news anchor. Listening to her, you get the impression of someone who's contributed a lot of their time to education, learning, refining their work. And I think it's a brilliant opportunity to speak with her and learn these things with the hope that it could benefit some future young woman or man that would love to find out the pathway to being a news anchor. There's Black Stallion and Denise Plummer, two Calypsonians who've passed away. I admired Black Stallion ever since I was a little boy. I knew I wanted to chat with him. This goes further back than podcasting. I wish I had started this podcast sooner. There's a gentleman by the name of Wendell Constantine. There's a show called Party Time, and he was a host on it. I went to a graduation, and the master of ceremonies was Wendell Constantine. And if you haven't heard Wendell Constantine's voice, oh boy, it is fabulous. He's the person that you'd want producing or being the master of ceremonies at some corporate event or wedding meant to dazzle. And I think about the years that he would have contributed to refining his voice. And I say, hey, that's someone that I'd love to chat with. Wendell Constantine. I'd like to learn how he got there and how others could get there. Peter Elias, brilliant fashion designer. He's worked with Wendy Fitzwilliam, who went on to win the Miss Universe some years ago. So Peter Elias is a fashion designer. He has stores around Trinidad and Tobago. He speaks about how fashion could build confidence in women. I'd love to learn more about the role of fashion in building confidence. If you see how I dress, you'd understand why. There's the mighty Lingo, an ex-tempo champ. Now, Lingo is a calypsonian. He's visually impaired. An ex-tempo is a lyrically improvised form of calypso. So the calypsonian would go on stage and they would be given a topic area, whether it's politics, education, food, marriage. And on the spot, they would have to come up with lyrics to a very... It's a strange kind of rhythm that they would have playing in the background. I'm not going to try to reproduce it, but you could look up ex-tempo Trinidad and Tobago. I remember meeting Lingo at the Blind Institute in Trinidad, and he said to me that he'd driven a car. And I said, that's amazing. And he said something... He responded, something is only amazing if you haven't done it or seen it. And he's right, because I've never seen someone who's visually impaired drive. But I guess once I have, no, I think that would always be amazing to see. I've reached out to Lingo. He's agreed to chat. It hasn't worked out as yet, but I'd love to speak to Lingo. He has this charisma. Rachel Price is a comedian I'd love to talk to. And Tommy Joseph. I'm thinking back to the 80s. Watching Rachel Price and Tommy Joseph, little clips or trailers advertising the events, and looking at them, I get the impression that they did a lot of crowd work. I appreciate crowd work, and I'd love to learn more about crowd work. Tommy Joseph, I haven't seen a lot of him, but he was very active during the time of Sprangalang, Errol Fabian, who I've chatted with on Caribbean content creators. They made ads for television. Titi Post, Courts. Then there's Trevor Sayers. He's a content creator that I think about him as one of the OGs, outrageous content. But I know Trevor Sayers, he has a business in the background. For small businesses, how does content creation work? Especially when you're doing outrageous content and then aligning it with your objectives as a businessman. So I'd love to speak with Trevor Sayers, although he scares me. As I mentioned earlier, this list is by no means exhaustive, but when I think about creators that I'd love to speak with, these are the names that pop out immediately. If you're listening to the show and you're familiar with content creators from Trinidad and Tobago and the wider Caribbean, please feel free to be in touch with me on Instagram. I am at Lyndon Baptiste. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next episode.